So that was a lie.
Indeed, Tyler the Creator either intentionally misdirected his audience or completely changed his mind. Either way, we were presented with a whole new world from Tyler the Creator on Monday, yes Monday, 28th of October, with the release of his 8th album, CHROMAKOPIA. As with all Tyler albums up to this point, we are presented with a strong visual identity and seemingly new character for the new project. The initial Saint Chroma video introduced us to this sepia tone world where Tyler dons a mask of himself, leading a platoon of faceless men into this large container before blowing it up and introducing a moment of bright, vivid colours into the video. A striking introduction for what was to come. Fans were immediately dissecting every lyric, every frame and every note of the song. The video and song ended abruptly as Tyler revealed the title of the new project, CHROMAKOPIA. A bizarre, confusing word of course, but in the context of the music and apparent thesis of the album, it's thematically on brand. With chroma referring to an abundance or intensity of colour, and copia meaning copy. I think some of the marketing and imagery of the album is an intentional misdirect on Tyler's part. Previous albums have primed us for elaborate world building, characters, and pop culture references, which are there in some respect of course, but this album is Tyler at his most vulnerable and conflicted. Tyler himself said that in order to tell some of these stories, to be this vulnerable, he felt like he had to wear a mask of himself.
And I say that in the sense of it's no exaggeration. It's like, it's so honest that I think I had to wear a mask of my own face to get some of that shit out.
That mask acts as the bridge or mediator between his vulnerability and us, his audience. As we received more music and information about CHROMAKOPIA, the picture being painted was of a conflicted, emotionally vulnerable artist. Noid was released next alongside an amazing music video with an identical colour palette to the video for Saint Chroma. The track feels like a subtle callback to his declaration on Saint Chroma that I ain't never had a doubt inside me, and if I ever told you that I did, I'm fucking lying. Noid doubles down on the feelings of unease with a 70s psych rock inspired instrumental and an amazing Zambian sample. The video is the embodiment of, as you guessed, paranoia, with Tyler being chased by rabid fans and hallucinations. Longtime fans of Tyler would be aware that this is not the first time he's made explicit references to his relationship with his own fans and audience, most notably on 2013's Colossus track. Noid feels like an updated, more mature and vulnerable version of Colossus, with his instrumental choice being as scatterbrained and unpredictable as Tyler's bars. He speaks on not being afforded any privacy, being anxious about almost everyone around him, and drops one of the themes that is essential to CHROMAKOPIA, parenthood, or an aversion to it. The references to cameras and the spotlight is nothing new for Tyler, but the presentation of such is most certainly. That lens is now applied to not only his fans, but everyone around him. As the days went by, we received more and more snippets and news regarding the album, including a world tour, merchandise, and physical album releases. And I have to say that Tyler's album rollouts are always so refreshing and straightforward. Within 12 days, we went from announcement to release with no delays, no release pushbacks or anything. And so we come to Monday, 28th of October, going against the grain of usual Friday releases for a clear reason. In a 2023 interview with Nardwuar, he made it clear that he was considering the idea of releasing music on a different day that wasn't the standard Friday, with the intent for his listeners to actively engage with the music rather than passively listening over the weekend. And considering how CHROMAKOPIA sounds and its lyrical content, that makes perfect sense. The album actively rewards your attention with callbacks and beautiful transitions between songs, intricate musical nuances, and a wildly unpredictable nature. Pulling from soul, R&B, psychedelic music, southern hip-hop, and so much more, CHROMAKOPIA is an apotheosis of all of Tyler's trademarks he's been working on for 15 years. But what is it actually about? What is the mission statement of CHROMAKOPIA? At a glance, it's an album about a lot of things. Aging, the passage of time, the conflict between family life and freedom. An album from Tyler the Creator about the panic of time passing but still trying to live in the moment hits particularly home for me as someone who grew up with his music from around the age of 13. As someone coming towards my late 20s now, these themes communicated through an artist who effectively embodies a lot of my youth is particularly powerful. CHROMAKOPIA is narrated by Benita Smith, Tyler's very supportive mother, who acts as the wise sage imparting wisdom throughout the album at key points. She's the first voice we hear on the very first song, in fact, telling Tyler that the light isn't on him, it's in him, and encourages him not to dim said light for anybody. Tyler has used the motif of light before, particularly on some Igor tracks, but now flips the script on its original use. He's apparently been searching for something that has been within him. The struggle is to keep it on and keep it burning as he comes to terms with the very real realization of aging. He then uses the first verse of St. Chroma as a sort of origin story for himself, describing where he came from before the days of Bastard, establishing how long he's been doing this before proclaiming that Pharrell Williams gave him encouragement to continue to chase his dreams, and Tyler believed him.
He said I could do it too, and more than I believe him.
As has been well documented at this point, there is no single bigger influence on Tyler's artistic sensibilities than Pharrell, and he will use any opportunity he can to remind people of that fact. Tyler then says, "Give a fuck about tradition, stop impressing the dead," which is a piece of advice imparted to him from Pharrell himself. And in one line, it sums up Tyler's entire creative approach from those early MySpace days up until CHROMAKOPIA. Tyler has always prided himself on reinvention, moving forward and challenging himself at every opportunity. On What's Good from Eagle, for example, he said,
I don't know, repeat, I reset.
A huge part of the appeal of Tyler's music is both its unpredictability and how it somehow always remains distinctly Tyler the Creator. I ain't ever had a doubt inside of me, and if I ever told you that I did, I'm fucking lying. This is the foreshadowing that will see Tyler's mask slip later down the line. Tyler is a supremely talented and confident artist, assured in his own abilities and talents, and has made it a point to remind his audience on countless occasions. However, it's worth noting that this bar is rapped while Tyler is still introducing us to this character, this masked character, and this line pays off in an amazing way later down the line that we will get to. In the short second verse, Tyler makes more references to his childhood and implies that he was somehow different, and continues the themes of maternal encouragement that was previously alluded to. His choice of words to describe universal experiences is so specific and evocative. Instead of just saying he's having a bit of a midlife crisis, he says, "Mirror got me thinking about my bookend. I just need this time to myself to figure me out. Do I keep the light on or do I gracefully bow out?" That final light is the heart of the conflict of CHROMAKOPIA, and I feel like this theme was heavily alluded to on some of the Estate Cell tracks, particularly Heaven to Me. The song ends with more words of encouragement from his mum before Daniel Caesar once again asks us if we can feel that fire. It's no coincidence that the next song, Rah Tah Tah or Rah Tah Tah, has Tyler at his most aggressive and high tempo, perhaps on the whole album. Aside from the fact that the song absolutely fucking slaps, we get a version of Tyler at his most confident. Thematically, the light is shining the brightest here as he drops bar after bar.
Biscuit ass niggas wonder how I got my jiffy up.
Is fucking hilarious, and "Crib so damn big I need a diaper and a sippy cup" is the kind of tongue-in-cheek humor we usually associate with a younger Tyler. The instrumental is loud, ominous, zany as hell as Tyler lists all of the things that separate him from his supposed peers. Similarly to the structure of What a Day, again from the Estate Cell, Tyler describes how he sees himself as a singular artist who stays true to his craft. He even describes never driving a Hellcat in a clear reference to this bar from What a Day.
Never have I drove a Hellcat or a Maserati.
However, it's so exaggerated and he hammers down the point of living a life, never really letting anyone get close to him, as a hint towards the looming paranoia of the next song. He says,
"You're moving sloppy if you get that sloppy where you sleep at. Never tell them niggas or those women where you breathe at."
Clearly signposting his lack of trust for most people. He's worried about letting people in, separating sex from actual connection, and concerns about unsubstantiated rumors. Tyler makes a reference to Lionel Boyce, previously of Loiter Squad and now starring in The Bear, in a nod to the insane amount of talent produced by Odd Future, before declaring himself the biggest in the city after Kendrick. And to be honest, that is a claim that is more than fair. Over the last 15 years, Tyler's musical and cultural influence out of the West Coast is ridiculously wide-reaching. So much so that the only person he feels comfortable claiming remains ahead of him is Kendrick Lamar. Tyler has gone on record numerous times about his love for Kendrick and his music, at one point referring to Kendrick as someone who gave him the confidence to be vulnerable with both his voice and lyrics.
I know I'm not the best singer, but a friend of mine named Kendrick was, I played him some stuff and he said, oh, this shit is just feeling. Like you weren't worried about the technical being perfect with your vocal. It was actual emotion. And when he said that, it was like, oh shit, you're right. That's why I don't try to always get people to sing sometimes I'm just like, fuck it, I'll sing it because someone else can't really sing my truth and what I'm trying to say. So I got it out.
Shortly after Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers dropped in 2022, Tyler geeked out on how much he loved the album. And it seems it wasn't just empty words, as those strong themes of self-reflection that color Mr. Morale are all over CHROMAKOPIA. It's not a stretch to claim that it may have been an important reference point for Tyler. Rah Tah Tah ends with Tyler repeating that he's paranoid because people around him are bums, before seamlessly transitioning into Noid. As previously mentioned, Noid feels like a more mature and vulnerable version of Colossus. The same person expressing the same ideas, only with a decade more worth of experiences, not to mention a decade to continue improving his production quality. In an album that makes clear references to the history of both hip-hop and Black Americans, I can't help but feel like this is also a reference to the classic Ghetto Boys' Mind Playing Tricks on Me track, one of the most beloved hip-hop songs of the 1990s. Living between cameras and recorders is one of the lyrics on here, and it seems to suggest an explicit attempt at dodging unwanted public scrutiny and invasions of privacy. And over his long career, Tyler has somehow managed the almost impossible feat of maintaining a seemingly frequent connection with his fans whilst remaining mostly private about his personal life. Down the years, people continue to speculate on his personal relationships, his friendships, his sexuality, and a whole lot more, and that has to take its toll at some point. The chorus, lifted from the original 1970s Zambian sample, roughly translates to, "When you come at my house, please be respectful, because I don't like talking too much. Talking too much breeds gossip." I doubt anyone needs an explanation as to how thematically relevant these lyrics are to Noid. Tyler becomes more and more paranoid as the song continues, noticing every car that drives by him, triple locking his door, and even keeping a gun under his bed. The verse ends with the first hint of Tyler's struggle with the concept of parenthood and whether or not to have kids. Again, nothing new conceptually for Tyler, but it's a new approach. On Potholes from Flower Boy, for example, he rapped,
"Find somebody who love me and raise a couple of lizards, but my vehicle's good for now, that's in a couple of miles."
7 years previously, he rapped explicitly about delaying settling down and having a family, and instead indulging in his prized possessions, his cars. And that car motif, both literally and as representations of his relationships, is further explored on the next song, Darling I. And towards the end of Noid, Tyler grows more intense and frustrated at people's seeming lack of basic decency, describing situations where he's interrupted at dinner, and even having his conversations recorded before declaring he trusts no one. The instrumental grows more brooding as Tyler's rapping becomes more high-pitched, almost short of breath, as he finally declares that he simply wants to be left alone. In a seeming contradiction to that sentiment, this sets up the inverse of this sentiment, with Darling I immediately following. Tyler's mum returns to impart some advice. Importantly, when she tells him to never tell anyone that he loves them, she uses the word us. "If you don't mean it, don't tell us," she says, implying that she's giving this advice to Tyler directly as a consequence of her own lived experiences. In contrast musically to Noid, Darling I is a light, catchy, summery R&B song that on the face of it sounds incredibly romantic. It's full of glittering synths, summery guitars, and a high-pitched version of Tyler he's used before for singing appearances. He's previously used this sort of misdirect, most notably on I Think from Igor, a song that appears like a declaration and embrace of pure unadulterated love, but within the scope of the album is a deeply conflicted song. We're more primed for that sentiment with Darling I, with Tyler's mother immediately telling us that he might not know what it means to actually say he's in love.
"Don't ever tell no bitch you love her. If you don't mean it, don't tell us."
The short first verse, with Tyler's voice super pitched up, is a direct continuation from the themes of Noid, only wrapped up in a lighter surrounding. He's worried, paranoid about a problem he has that is still looming large. That problem appears to be commitment, explicitly saying that he can't sign the dotted line of marriage. He declares that forever is too long, another reference to this album's struggle between so-called freedom and family life. Or as he said on Say Chroma, between the light or bowing out. It stands to reason that bowing out in this context refers to settling down and starting a family. He sings the hook, immediately catchy,
Darling, I keep falling in love. Darling.
Alongside Teaser Touchdown, whose classic 90s R&B sound and delivery is perfect on this. Tyler uses the second verse to employ a metaphor he's used many times before, cars. He lists all the reasons why he enjoys driving different cars at different times for different reasons, whether it be safety, the handling, or aesthetics.
Feel safe in the grove, big boy when I drive. Love them all for different reasons at the same damn time.
You'll note that this view of cars and relationships was also a running theme throughout the entirety of Flower Boy. Importantly, and this is where I feel he begins letting that mask slowly slip away, he cuts the metaphor short pretty quickly to state in no uncertain terms that monogamy is not for me, and rejects the societal consensus that is the only way to form meaningful relationships. And whilst monogamy is clearly for some, maybe a lot of people, it can't be a blanket statement for all. But the pressure from friends, from family and society to conform to a monogamous way of life, when you genuinely don't think it's for you, must be immense. And I must also point out that without the context of the rest of the album, this could sound like a thinly veiled excuse to avoid commitment or even cheat. But within the scope of the album, it comes off as a genuine attempt at exploring exactly what is right for him. There's also what appears to be a reference to societal expectations of sexuality with the line,
Too many rules, I'm too curious to try to be hiding things from the shame of the side of me.
that quote-unquote too many rules bar, I feel, is a combination of two separate but for Tyler intertwined societal expectations: monogamous relationships and heterosexual relationships. Once again, I have to mention the estate sale because in hindsight it gave a pretty telling glimpse about the themes of Chromakopia. On Sorry Not Sorry, he raps about being sorry about both the guys he had to hide and the girls he lied to. With that one bar, it's a clear reference to both monogamy and sexuality. Tyler then goes on to briefly picture the idyllic life of a new crib and 2 kids before being sidetracked with another infatuation. He then solemnly retreats and claims that once he's old and grey, if he wasn't able to settle down, he'll still be thankful for the memories that made him who he was. Music is the most fulfilling thing for him, and it will make him lonely, but he'll have his Grammys for company. Which to me is incredibly bittersweet when you consider his mother's advice throughout the album. She is the one telling him, supporting him to keep shining bright. But now we see the conflict between that bright light and ending up alone. It also makes the chorus of Darling, I Keep Falling in Love much less a declaration of love and more like an admission of an addiction he can't kick. Addicted to love, addicted to the idea of falling in love, but having to also accept that it might leave him alone. Whilst the song is lyrically vivid, we cannot ignore the musicality of the song too. It's maybe the most Pharrell inspired of the tracks on here, with even some drop it like it's hot style tongue clicks going on in the background. The second half of the song turns into an amazing Tizo touchdown crooning session as Tyler gives up rapping to straight up say that he doesn't think it's fair for one person to be stuck with just him. Tizo repeats the mantra that forever is too long before Tyler's mother comes back to both bookend the song and introduce the next one. She says transparency is key and to be honest, which leads into one of Tyler's best ever displays of storytelling on Hey Jane. Hey Jane is a back and forth between Tyler and a woman who seemingly shared a pregnancy scare together. The title is also a reference to this New York-based healthcare company that provides pregnancy termination related services. His mother tells him the age-old advice of wearing a condom before she's abruptly cut off by the start of the song, to me indicating that her words might have fallen on deaf ears.
Always, always, always wear a condom. Don't trust it.
Hey Jane.
The first verse has Tyler in vivid detail explaining his emotional reaction to finding out he got someone pregnant and how they proceed from here. It's an incredibly honest and upfront portrayal that feels like it was written in real time. He tries to find some common ground and rationalize how and why they might be good together, saying that they're a match and bonding over the fact that both of their dads are gone. Considering his mother's advice and the fact that throughout Tyler's career his father's absence is a theme of regular occurrence, it's safe to assume that there are probably some parallels between this tale and Tyler's mother's and father's relationship. His mother is imparting this advice to him because she may have gone through something similar. He makes it a point to provide support and rationalize their decision together, but ultimately he acknowledges that it's her decision at the end of the day. He wants to jump out, but if she doesn't, he can't bug out.
Time blocking the driveway, I cannot pull out now, I didn't pull out, wow.
It's such a vivid image, an amazing way to continue that car motif that runs through so much of his music. He describes being petrified and terrified, and as his mother says, remains honest and transparent. Tyler admits that he's not in any headspace to raise a child, perhaps conflicted by this, knowing he may be the absent father that had such an effect on himself. He then establishes, rightfully so, the emotional and physical pressures on the person actually carrying the child, and how in comparison he's not really in a position to complain. But importantly, he doesn't let that fact invalidate his own feelings. And for an album as conflicted and unsure as this one, he's able to somehow remain incredibly rational and level-headed about his own emotions. The bus stopped at like we ain't make it to love yet. is Tyler's way of beginning to communicate the very valid point that they just don't know each other very well. They haven't lived together, they haven't argued together, they haven't gone on vacation. He questions whether that's a good foundation to have kids with and doesn't come to an answer. I think that's because whilst he would clearly feel incredibly conflicted about having this person raise a child alone, he himself was a product of a single parent household. And as we found out later in the album, he wouldn't have had it any other way. Tyler puts the ball in her court and ends the verse by declaring it's her choice, there's no pressure, and he'll support her regardless. The second half of the song is dedicated to flipping the perspective, giving his love interest her rationale and her reasoning. The verse is beautifully mirrored with the first verse, with the woman in question reciprocating the feelings of anxiety and panic, whilst also rationalizing why they might be good together. But the panic of time running out is flipped on Tyler. She's not concerned about running out of time to experience the joys of freedom and single life like Tyler is, but rather running out of time to have a child. She's concerned that this might be her best shot at having a child with someone who is, in her words, a little weird but overall a good dude. She's 35 and her ovaries might not reset, she says. She indicates that she's gone through a pregnancy termination before, at the age of 24, and is not ready to deal with that experience again. In another bittersweet moment, she expresses that she's more than comfortable being a single parent, reflecting on the fact that they both came from single parent households and their mums did an amazing job raising them. I think the fact that she maintains that she can raise a child on her own without a strained relationship with Tyler is a real point of conflict for him. As we know from previous songs, the attitude he had towards his own father throughout his life, a topic that is discussed at length later down the line of this album. The vocal inflection and intensity of the verse grows stronger and stronger as she describes more of the inevitable emotional and physical changes pregnancy causes, as well as admonishing herself for feeling scared and feeling like a failure. Importantly, the decision isn't made by the end of the song. She simply says she hopes they remain cool at the end of the day. Whether she chooses to raise this child alone or not, or have it at all, she wants that relationship to remain strong, which might be wishful thinking or overly optimistic, but we aren't privy to that information. Initially, the placement of I Killed You after this song seemed to me to be a confirmation that they chose not to have this child, which might be true, but it's clearly a much broader song about generational conceptions of identity, particularly Black American identity, which Tyler has made songs about before, maybe most notably on something like Massa, but not this explicitly. On an album driven by maternal advice and reflections of parenthood, as a prominent Black man in America, a song like I Killed You makes perfect sense. The lens he chooses to discuss identity initially is through hairstyles and hair textures, making references to hot combs, knots, and even how hair was used as maps during slavery. A line that gets me is,
Your natural state is threatening to the point that I point at myself and self-esteem, bitch, I killed you.
It says so much with so little. The racist trope of the threatening Black man having to code switch and so much more is laced into this line. And as someone who is Black with afro hair, this is definitely something I can relate to. Feel ashamed, so we straightened you out has 3 whole different meanings to me. Of course, in reference to the child that never was from the previous track, also the beauty standards of the West that for too many years has viewed fair straight hair as the ideal, but also a possible reference to sexuality, all different facets of identity intersecting and creating the people we are. The beat itself is bare bones, ever-changing and unpredictable as Tyler continues with the extended metaphors. Therefore, bitch, I killed you, Jerry's and Mimi's, I burnt you, I cut you, I filled you up with chemis. Feels like a reflection on the different iterations of Tyler the Creator. Always coming up with new characters, new personas that perhaps he started to lose sight or hide who he truly is. It's not a coincidence again that we see him explicitly attempt to eliminate his former selves in the music video for Sorry Not Sorry. But doing all of this through the metaphor of afro hair is fucking amazing. He speaks on the lineage of Black men and women who have time and time again had their identities suppressed, demeaned, and undervalued, as he rightfully gets more intense. This puts into perspective the album cover, too, where Tyler sports his natural afro hair for the first time. On previous album covers, his hair is usually covered by a hat, a wig, a mask, or has been dyed. He describes how afro hair defies gravity, almost like a superpower in a clear attempt to reclaim its qualities. Now, I myself, at the age of 17, straightened/relaxed my hair in what was probably a subconscious attempt at conforming to standard ideas of beauty or acceptability or something to that effect. When I hear this song, I think back to that moment and I just think, what the fuck was I doing? Childish Gambino has a surprise appearance on the back end of the song as he sings into the cosmos about the beauty of not just hair, it would seem, but one's true self in general. The song feels like it opens up musically as Tyler begins to shed that burden of shame from childhood. Speaking of shame and acceptance, that is a major theme of the following song, Judge Judy. I think Judge Judy is one of the more polarizing songs of CHROMAKOPIA, and I think that's mainly due to its structure and its delivery. Delivered in a half-sung, half-rapped flow over slowly strummed guitars, it's one of the more overtly psychedelic moments of the album. The thesis of the opening verse is setting up a new love interest or infatuation for Tyler. He's immediately attracted to this person physically and initiates a slap-together haphazard date. The second verse is where we get to the real meat of the song. Tyler explicitly describes their conversations about a variety of sexual fetishes that get them off.
I asked her what she into, she told me lead the way. I'm into body rubs, bondage, and cream pies we could play.
Now Tyler's no stranger to explicit lyrics, of course, but it feels particularly vulnerable and intimate when delivered in this way, as opposed to the explicit lyrics of Goblin tracks like Tron Cat or She. He makes a callback to Dogtooth from the estate sale, re-establishing once again that her past experiences with previous lovers is none of his concern and doesn't judge her. He describes her during the bridge as a free spirit, a voyeur who matched his energy perfectly. It's not explicitly mentioned, but I get the impression that he feels this person may be even more suited to him than the previously mentioned Jane. It's not a stretch to assume that free spirit he mentions that she has might align with his desire to not be in a monogamous relationship, but still reap the benefits of love. It sounds like the perfect situation for both of them. But then the song takes a super dark and tragic turn, one that I definitely wasn't expecting when I first heard it and didn't even really register until a couple of days later. Tyler describes a letter he received from Judy as they hadn't spoken in a while. She says,
Sorry that I haven't been communicating much. This past year has been rough. It spread it to my head.
The implication being that when they first dated or met each other, she was aware of an illness she had. I knew it when we met, she says. And this is such a crucial and tragic line to me. It may imply that the reason she was such a free spirit was as a consequence of having to face her own mortality and cut short life. She expresses gratitude for the moments they shared and Tyler's lack of judgment, and wishes him the best for the rest of his life. Thematically, it links perfectly back to Tyler's ever-growing fear of growing old and perhaps ending up alone because he can't remain with one person.
I wasn't living right until they told me what was left.
Is Judy's tragic liberation. Having her life cut short forced her to live the life she always wanted to, a fulfilling, experiential one devoid of judgment. The lesson for Tyler to take is to make that decision before it's too late for him. Which life does he want to lead? But we still find him at a crossroads weighing up his options. Sticky is up next, and Tyler arranges one of the best fucking bangers of his whole career. Star-studded with appearances from southern rappers Glorilla, Sexy Red, and Lil Wayne, Sticky sounds and feels like something cooked up on the playground by people banging their hands against the wall and the tables. In the best way, of course. Full of zany trumpets and horns and unexpected musical detours, Sticky is a snap back to the self-assured, confident version of himself we saw on Rah Tah Tah. The song, no pun intended, is immediately sticky. Tyler's initial high-pitched verse, the whistled and layered vocals pay off immeasurably once the beat kicks in and Glorilla's unmistakable voice comes in for her mini-verse. It's only 4 bars, but it's aggressive and in your face like the song requires, and that energy is only matched and upped with every following verse. Tyler flips from the vulnerable, unsure version of himself we heard on the last couple tracks to the most bombastic and over-the-top one. He says,
Jack of all trades, name a nigga who ahead of me, must be God instead of me.
He has previously referred to himself as God, most notably on What's Good. The Jack of all trades bar is an undeniable fact, as he continues to write, rap, produce, sing, direct, design, and so much more. It's been the same approach ever since the first days of Odd Future. Sexy Red's sexy ad-lib acts as a siren for her unmatched energy, and her tone of voice on an instrumental like this is just perfect. After these verses, the last person I was expecting to hear was fucking Lil Wayne, as he somehow manages to fold an insane rhyme pattern with so few words. The way his verse ends with the whisper conversation bars, the drums knock and horns blare is insane.
Dripping condensation, gotta whisper conversations.
The next section is an unashamed homage to classics of Southern hip hop, which is kind of the entire thesis of the song.
Better find a mop, it's getting sticky in this bitch. Better find a mop, it's getting sticky in this bitch.
It samples this 2007 Young Buck song,
Rolling, I just can't fold it. I got 'em like, hey, got 'em rolling, the Skittles on the
which both itself and Sticky seems to pull strong influence from another Southern hip hop classic. The horns and flow sound quite similar to the C Murder classic Down For My Ends as well. There's even a video right here of Tyler himself expressing love for this C Murder track. The back half of the song continues his boasting streak pretty aggressively as we transition into one of the most crucial songs on the album, Take Your Mask Off. Structured as a diatribe against wearing metaphorical masks to hide true feelings and identities, Tyler examines 4 distinct characters. The first verse is dedicated to a wannabe gangster. Importantly, he makes the distinction that the life this person follows isn't through poverty or lack of opportunities, and specifically describes this person having come from a well-off middle-class family with both parents in the picture.
A good kid, fine home, mom and dad in the pic, a little middle class money every Christmas legit.
He provides a scathing analysis of how not being wanted to be seen soft or as a bitch led to irreversible consequences. The desperate need to be accepted convinced this person to don the gangster mask and ends up facing 5 to 10 years in jail. Tyler also mentions how the tough man persona, the face tattoos and guns can't hide the fact that this person is fundamentally sad, and calls him an actor before declaring on the hook that he hopes the mask comes off and he finds himself. Again, themes that Tyler isn't new to. On Running Out of Time from Igor, he explicitly requests that his love interest take off his mask. And although that was in the context of love, relationships, and sexuality, it fundamentally boils down to the same points of authenticity and identity. The second verse is dedicated to a preacher figure, and it's worth remembering that Tyler has been consistently critical of organized religion since the very start of his career. Even more scathing, perhaps, he attacks this preacher for selling people lies, profiting from those lies, and using his platform for hate, specifically against gay people.
Big bank from them collections, but what you buying? Ain't too fond of them gauge, you don't deny it, wait.
He runs with that final critique and describes a man who, under the guise of a perfect family man who's religious, didn't come to terms with his own sexuality, who thought God would hate him, so he covered it up. Which I personally feel is sad, and I'm sure that inflicted self-hate taught through religion is unfortunately quite common, although it can never excuse flat-out homophobia. It sounds, however, like this person is about to reach a point of clarity. They're sick of the shame, hiding their true self, and is about to trade it in for freedom and to stand in the light, which is an apt metaphor considering the religious angle too. However, this preacher experiences what can only be described as the inverse of post-nut clarity and retreats back into his religion to hide his true self as soon as he's had his sexual satisfaction.
Traded all to be free and shine bright like the sun, but you back on that religious shit as soon as you come.
Maybe an endless cycle that might not ever be broken. Verse 3 is more somber, describing a woman living the idyllic nuclear family life with a large house and financially successful husband. But something is missing. Her personality and individuality has slowly been eroded by a life of mundanity. Tired of being at home, personality gone, body ain't been the same, postpartum is long, your identity gone. That line, of course, links back to Tyler's apprehension towards having kids, as well as his back and forth with Jane. This might sound weird, but the minute I heard this verse, it reminded me of the Bo Burnham song, The Chicken, which is another track about a person stuck in a mundane life, filled with regret and wondering what might have been. The verse ends on a super dark note as Tyler proclaims this person can't even get alone time to contemplate taking her own life. This is the version of reality that clearly makes Tyler so tentative to start a family with kids. He doesn't want this version of that life. Verse 4 is the most important of the track, where he turns that level of critique against himself. Tool won't stay hard, pain in your chest, hair falling out, won't blame it on the stress, is a direct counter to his over-the-top confident claims on Sticky. He refutes all of the claims he told himself about why he feels the way he does. It's not exes or new partners, but something wrong with himself. And then we get to a version of insecurity we've rarely, if ever, heard from Tyler. Regardless of what he writes about, he's usually super assured in his talents as an artist, but even that aspect of himself doesn't escape critique. He says,
You talk a lot of shit to not even be number one. Your beats ain't placing, them songs ain't slapping, your raps ain't ranking.
He effectively tells himself to pack it all in, bow out with grace, as he'd hinted at on St. Chroma. He skips over elaborate metaphors to try and deliver what, in this moment to him, feels like a harsh truth. He flat out says that the reason he's scared of having children is because he's selfish and needs therapy. Once again, I must point to Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers as a point of reference for some of the themes on the album. The final lines of the song are the most important to me. Now go stand in the sun and use some fake tears to water your roots. Take that mask off from telling the truth. Let's talk about it. The imagery is beautiful, first off, but the implication is both meta and super critical. It implies that what we've heard up until now in his entire career and this very album is kind of a facade. Even the moments of vulnerability on songs like Hey Jane or Darling I are what he describes as fake tears still within the realms of a persona. The mask is still on, so to speak, even under the pretense of being vulnerable. He dares himself to actually take off the mask and explore vulnerabilities and insecurities that are eating away at him. And he calls his own bluff on the very next song. Tomorrow is one of my personal favorites on CHROMAKOPIA and poses an immediate challenge to Tyler's attitude and where he sees himself at this point in his life. Driven by amazing, jazzy, Latin-inspired guitars played by an artist called Pedro Martins, Tomorrow's musical palette is the most delicate and intimate of the album. It also feels super Stevie Wonder-inspired with its arrangement and musical phrasings. Tyler's attitude towards children is immediately challenged by his mother on the spoken word intro.
Nigga, I'm getting old and I need a grandchild, please.
As she herself comes to terms with getting older and wanting to have just a single grandchild. It also links back to him calling himself selfish for not wanting to have children on the previous track. Not only does he feel selfish for prioritizing his own time over a hypothetical family, but for not delivering his mother's wish. My mother's hands don't look the same, these jet black strands are turning grey, is the communication of a very real aspect of being a subject and a witness to aging. It's all in the details. We don't notice it on a macro level until we begin to look closer. Even on one of the most vulnerable moments on the album, being Hey Jane, he was still wearing that mask and running away from aging, evident by the fact that on Hey Jane, he described himself as having a thin waist.
Hey T, your legs long and your waist thin.
And now the mask is off. On Tomorrow, he admits to weight gain.
I'm gaining weight, I'd rather rest.
The post-chorus is where he sings debating whether or not to worry about tomorrow is really significant. As mentioned in previous tracks and albums, Tyler always prides himself on looking towards the future, which for him seems to represent an endless sea of opportunity and reinvention, a chance to expand artistically, try new endeavors and change, which is a sentiment I do believe, unfortunately, naturally slowly erodes as we age. The time to worry about tomorrow is now, because he feels he's running out of time for not only himself, but his mother. It's a stark contrast but important thematic link to one song from Flower Boy, being November. November is a song all about worrying about the future, worrying about insecurities, and how Tyler can maintain his legacy. He deals with these issues by wishing to go back to November, with November being a representation of a simpler, more innocent, worry-free time. The driving, worrying nature of Tomorrow is similar to this, but its resolution is now different. He appears ready to maybe face that future head on. Tyler begins his verse by coming to the realization to the fact that he is changing. And for someone who changes artistically as much as Tyler does, this shouldn't be a shock. But as previously mentioned, from his perspective, we've just been watching him switch out one mask for another mask. It's the person underneath that mask we are now listening to, the person underneath the mask of himself. That version of T that you knew as a memory is both directed at his audience and personal relationships. To his audience, he is always reinventing his style and sound. In his personal life, the natural effects of change and age is now taking course and possibly affecting his relationships. As many people have rightly pointed out, the following section of the song bears a lot of similarities to Kanye West's Welcome to Heartbreak, particularly the following lyrics.
They sharing pictures of these moments, shit is really cute, and all I got is photos of my Rari and some silly suits.
Which communicates the exact same message of Welcome to Heartbreak with these lyrics.
My friends show me pictures of his kids, and all I could show him was pictures of my cribs.
A running theme of CHROMAKOPIA is a lack of resolution, which continues with the end of Tyler's verse. he debates once again settling down or continuing to have casual relationships. He remains paranoid, and the only thing he knows what to do with these emotions is communicate those through art and music. The only assurance we get is to not wait on him for any sort of fulfillment, whether it be a love interest, his mother, or us, his audience. The song closes out with a super Stevie Wonder inspired instrumental section before the tone of the album violently flips once again. Like previous tracks, I was initially confused by the placement of the next song coming immediately after such a tender moment, but in hindsight it does make perfect sense. Stylistically, Thought I Was Dead is loud, confident, and exaggerated, similarly to tracks like Sticky or Rah Tah Tah. Thought I Was Dead, to me, sounds like a final attempt to put the mask of himself back on after Tomorrow allowed it to momentarily come off. The title refers to that loud, boisterous side of Tyler. The previous vulnerable moment could have ended this side to Tyler's personality, and that is what I think he's referring to. His delivery on the first verse is confrontational and confident in a clear attempt to distance from the version of himself in the previous track. And also the horns and drums are fucking crazy. We get a surprise feature from Schoolboy Q, who continues the themes of confrontation and confidence. The bridge is where Tyler repeats that he doesn't want to be found and doesn't want to be down. In the context of the song alone, it's a reference to wanting to maintain as private a life as possible without the invasion of privacy he clearly makes reference to. But on a more macro level, not wanting to be found is an expression of those insecurities and vulnerabilities he spoke on Tomorrow. That version of him is currently in hiding as he gets on his more aggressive wave. His mother comes back in to defend him and repeat the sentiment that these people who criticize certain aspects of Tyler's character simply don't know him. The following verse is a direct rebuttal against what appears to be a selection of online half-baked critiques of various things Tyler has either said or done in his career. The very first bar appears to be a direct response to some of the backlash he received for these comments in an interview with May Carter.
This white kid, regular like Caucasian man, and he's like mocking Future and Gucci Mane like rap music. And like people are like, this shit hard. It's not even like satire. It's like, I'm just joking, I'm just mocking it. But I'm like, no, you can't do. And I hold rap music so close to my heart because this shit changed my life and everyone's life around me. And I'm a nerd about this shit.
White boys mocking this shit and y'all mad at me, y'all can suck my dick.
Whom most people inferred was about the rapper called Ian. He then goes on to brush aside worries about old lyrics, being a hater, and flexes how much he's achieved. I love the parallel with the bar,
I'ma crash shit out to my hair white,
flippantly disregarding his worry that he spotted some grey hairs on the previous track.
These jet black strands are turning gray.
To me, that is concrete evidence on this song that the mask is firmly back on. The rest of the verse continues this sentiment, including tongue-in-cheek lyrics about him being a hypocrite, not being real, and not actually meaning his previous outlandish lyrics. A particularly important bar is, why am I filled with this hate? I've got freedom in every way. It's important to note that he's filled with this quote-unquote hate on one of the more aggressive cuts on the album, where he explicitly suppresses his worries about time and aging. It's precisely because of that suppression that the hate he describes bubbles to the surface. The transition between the energy of this song and the following one feels like all of that aggression has now been fully exhausted. It immediately cuts to Like Him, opening with super gentle pianos as his mother describes some of the physical similarities between Tyler and his absent father. Now, if you know anything about Tyler the Creator's music, you'll know that he's referenced his father on many occasions, most of which in pretty scathing terms. On the first song on his first album, Bastard, and its title track, he ended it by rapping,
fuck a deal, I just want my father's email so I could tell him how much I fucking hate him in detail.
Of course, Answer from Wolf is the most explicit display of Tyler's feelings towards his father, but one of the songs I first thought of when I heard Like Him for the first time was also from Bastard, but its final track, Inglorious. He opened Inglorious by saying, my father died the day I came out of my mother's hole and left a burden on my soul until I was old enough to understand that the fucking didn't like me much. Inglorious is about confronting the fact that he has an absent father and the emotional toll it took. And as an angsty 19-year-old, that manifests itself in violence and anger. Fuck it, mama's proud of her asthmatic thin fuck. It's fundamentally Chromakopia in a nutshell. They communicate the same point. Like Him and Inglorious are thematically intertwined, separated only by maturity and aging. Inglorious showed the effect of Tyler's absent father, and Like That is the same version of himself, now unburdened by anger. The high-pitched vocal delivery is indicative that the level of vulnerability on display here is so palpable that he's reverted back to being a helpless, confused child. Tyler says that his mum said that he makes expressions like his father, with even a similar posture too. The childlike innocence of the lyrics and delivery is what gets to me personally. It's like, when you're a kid, everything your mum tells you is true by virtue of the fact that it's your mum. The fact that she is telling him this means it must be true, and Tyler must now reconcile the fact that he bears resemblance to someone he doesn't know and previously actively hated. He says he's chasing a ghost and doesn't know who or where he is. Such a simple and beautiful way to put it. An absent parent might as well be a ghost in this context, an idea or a feeling that has haunted him with resentment and anger his whole life. We can't ignore how this feeds into his apprehension or lack of desire to have children himself. The thing to come to terms with for Tyler is bearing resemblance to someone that, at this point in the song, he believes abandoned him. Now, of course, this song is going to hit home for most people who have an absent parent or particularly an absent father. And speaking as someone who was raised amazingly by a single mother, I can understand why it would do so. Having said that, I think it might be easier for someone like myself that has categorical proof that their biological father is human garbage, rather than Tyler's predicament of knowing absolutely nothing about this person. But what I can resonate with is that confusion that you might share similar traits, whether they be physical or personality-wise, with someone who you actually don't know, a stranger or a ghost. Tyler continues the theme of regressing into childhood as he innocently asks his mother to give him love, affection, and protection. And it's at this point in the song that I begin to well up. The image of a fully grown man, as vulnerable as a small child, assuring his mother that he wouldn't judge her for the decisions she made because everything worked out without him. Ironically, as childlike as this section is, I find it incredibly mature to balance these two overwhelming emotions. He recognizes that his mother did an amazing job alone with him, and he wouldn't have had it any other way, but still validates his own feelings of confusion and curiosity about his father. The song builds musically and intensity as we break out into what legitimately sounds like some Queen shit from the 70s. We get a single fucking word feature from Baby Keem here.
That's called motherfucking bars, nigga. You know nothing about that.
Before classic style Tyler synths come back in as he barks in the background. The image we get of Tyler and his mother's relationship in the next section is incredibly tender and honest. He says to her that he would never lie to you, so you don't ever have to lie to me. Flipping the advice his mother gave him on Take Your Mask Off, where she told him, "You don't ever have to lie to kick you." Additionally, that whole back and forth has to be a reference, and I hate to keep bringing them back up, but I have to, I'm sorry, a reference to the Kendrick song of the same name, You Ain't Gotta Lie to Kick It, which is framed from the perspective of Kendrick's mother imparting advice on a younger version of himself. Tyler ends the song by repeating the question of whether he looks like his father or not. Of course, in the grander scheme of things, questioning the characteristic similarities of the two as well as the physical. We then get a spoken word outro from Tyler's mother where we get the bombshell that recontextualizes both Tyler's whole life and a lot of his previous music.
And I'm sorry I was young, but he's always wanted to be a father to you. So I fucked up.
She claims it was her fault for him being absent and that he actually wanted to be a present figure in Tyler's life. She describes him as a good guy before apologizing to Tyler and not wanting to hold that against his father. The parallels with the second verse of Hey Jane shouldn't be lost on anyone. Those issues of trust and commitment may be something Tyler shares with his mother. Why she felt she had to raise him on her own, just like Jane was contemplating. It's for that reason that I believe Tyler establishes that whatever decision his mother made, he would not judge her for it. Not only because it all worked out for them, but because he can actively empathize with it too. The raw honesty between mother and son is something I really can't describe here, and it feels like a moment of real bonding between the two through admitting something that a lot of people would struggle to do. The transition between Like Him and Balloon catches a lot of people off guard, but having a song like this act as catharsis after the last song makes sense. Sonically, Balloon is wacky and super left field, driven by this Japanese sample. It feels like a weird Mario Kart retro, almost 8-bit beat, like an inverse of the childlike vulnerability into Euphoria from the last track. Some of the sentiments of this song are quite similar to Thought I Was Dead, but it leans more towards a direction of marrying that overt confidence with glimpses of vulnerability. Balloon's first verse is dedicated, no pun intended, to Tyler's dedication to his work. As he says, he works so hard because his soul profits. He uses a number of examples to exemplify his preference for authenticity over facade. He prefers A cups to BBLs is one of his examples. An interesting lyric that links both previous Tyler works and I Killed You from this album is everything real here, no lace front. A reference to the extended hair metaphor of I Killed You, but also his Igor persona that donned that striking wig, implying that this version of Tyler is even more authentic and vulnerable than that one. Fuck them regrets, call them and get all that weight off your chest. That's what Like Him served to do, and now that weight has been lifted. It's almost weightless, like a balloon. Doechii of TDE fame provides the second verse with one of the most animated displays of rapping you'll hear all year. Endless quotables and unmatched energy as she slowly increases the energy of the song before it bursts. Bars like out like a queen are the moments of levity we need after the intensity of Like Him. I Hope You Find Your Way Home is the closing credits music of the album. It's jazzy and epic and solemn all at the same time. Its title refers to a number of themes. Tyler has made references to being lost, literally and metaphorically, most notably on his last two albums. The tragedy is that whilst he feels this album might help someone find clarity for themselves, he might still be lost, still unsure as to what to do, so the next best thing is to attempt to help someone else on this journey. On his single verse, Tyler describes slipping and spinning, maintaining a teetotal and drug-free life, and once again establishing his love of cars.
Almost had a mini me, I wasn't ready, and she wanted it with me, I'm talking heavy.
Is yet again another reference to Hey Jane, rubber stamping the aging and parenthood themes that are vital to Chromakopia. He flat out says raising a child is not in his current interest, but once again questions whether he should before he's too old. That's why I feel it's safe to say he still might be lost when it comes to making that decision. The real epiphany, and what I believe Tyler finds in this song, isn't deciding whether or not to have a kid, but realizing he needn't exist in polar opposites. He can be vulnerable and confident at the same time, marrying the two within a matter of bars on this track. I did a whole collections in Paris. They didn't even send me the collection to wear it. I'm so embarrassed but happy that it happened. The flex of doing that collection, for example, immediately followed by the honest aftermath, is the two worlds colliding. We get one more voice note from Tyler's mum, wrapping up the narrative. She expresses her love and support and amazement for what Tyler has achieved before telling him to keep shining. There are some background vocals that repeat the phrase "run it back," hinting that this journey will be undertaken again. Thematically, lyrically, and musically, it loops right back into St. Chroma as the faint chants of CHROMAKOPIA come back into the fray after an amazing synth solo. I'm still not sure if that's Tyler playing those keys or someone else, but regardless, it's amazing. And that's where we end, without the resolution, but the promise that these will be questions may be asked indefinitely of Tyler. And I think that it's an album that was needed at this point in Tyler's career, especially after something as indulgent and luxurious as Call Me If You Get Lost. It's a reflection on themes we've heard on previous Tyler albums, only through a mature lens. It's yet another new version, a new world from Tyler, but ironically, he has to look back in order to look forward on Chromacopia. The imagery, visual language, and sound of the album is amazing, but I really do think as a songwriter, this is one of his most impressive projects. I'm not in a position to try and rank it amongst other Tyler albums or rate it or anything like that, and I sat with this album for as long as possible before even writing a single word of this video. Regardless, Chromacopia shows a perfect example of how to make a mature, vulnerable album that is self-reflective about its vulnerability. It's an incredibly simple but clever approach that Tyler executed almost flawlessly. I usually cannot wait to see what high concept character or theme Tyler can come up with next for the future, but this time I don't feel like that, and I think that's a good thing. I'm actively looking forward to learning and hearing new things as I live with this album and grow older myself.